Hey guys, and welcome to the Kashif Boothe podcast. If you're new here, each week I sit down with a guest and we discuss their career so far, the highs, the lows, what they've learned, and what's next for them. Today's guest is Joelle David, who I've known for probably almost a year, but I feel like we've known each
Mhm.
other for a while. So welcome to the
Yeah, known of each other, isn't it?
yes. You know how it is in this industry, but
Yeah.
welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really good. As good as you can be when uh the pandemic fatigue sets in, but I'm good. I'm good.
If you don't know who Joelle is, she is the creative director of Bluebird Pictures, who I'm excited to be working with as a freelancer producer. We've got exciting projects coming soon, which I know I can't talk about, but it's been great working with you. How long has it been? I think, has it been a month now?
I think it's been like a month, but yeah, you're right. We've got some cool projects coming up, and even more coming in. So it's a really exciting time to have
Mhm.
you on board as we go through like a process of expanding somewhere where I thought we'd never get to. So I'm sure we will go into that in more
Yes,
details. But yeah.
exactly. Well, cool. So how did you get started? Like, tell the listeners like your journey.
Mm. Like when I think about how I got started, so I went to university and I studied English lit and film, and it was actually completely by accident that I studied film because um I originally wanted to be an artist. I wanted to go to art school. I wanted to do art foundation. At like 17, 18, and I was doing art A level. That I was like obsessed with it. Like I was always painting, always drawing. So that's what I wanted to do. And then my art teachers did not send off my applications. So last minute, I had to choose a whole different um, course that I wanted to do because I didn't want to just not do anything for a year. So I ended up going not quite through clearing, but through like UCAS gave me like an extra option because my grades were really good. So it was really sad that they didn't send it off. So I ended up going to Southampton Uni to study English lit and film because it was still like a good top uni. Um, but when I got there, the film course was very theory based. So I didn't make anything for 3 years. So I learned a lot about the history of film, different genres, film noir, silent film. And I think that's really good to have that knowledge because when you go out throughout your career in film, whether you're a crew member or a director, all these films always come up in conversations anyway, and it's really good to know them. But yeah, I didn't actually get to make anything. So one of the things I did get to do was screenwriting on that course. So I did screenwriting for a year, and then so I guess that is kind of my start. But then once I left uni, I don't think I realized how difficult it was to get a job on set. Like no one told me that nothing was advertised. No one told me you had to kind of know someone who knows someone.
Mhm.
Like I know you hear that saying all the time, like it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I just at 21, I just didn't realize that was so true because if you think about all the productions that film in London, um, film TV shows or whatever, they're not advertised. They're not going to advertise for runners and stuff. So I did a lot of unpaid internships for about a year, and then I eventually joined like a runners agency and started getting work on set. So I guess that is formally my beginning, uni, and then as a runner.
That's good. I mean, I experienced the same kind of thing, but I knew what I wanted to do as soon as I went to uni. Like I did the
Mm.
BTEC media course. BTEC courses get a bad rap, but I'd highly
Mm.
recommend the BTEC course because that set me up for university. So to a certain degree, I was bored at uni because
Right.
I did all the history of film and stuff, and it was just boring to me. Like it was just
Mhm.
nothing really interesting. I think the only interesting part was uh just seeing what they considered classics and what kind of shaped cinema.
Yeah.
Like that was the most important thing, just to see where things have gone and started and how they are now. And so I think that was really cool. So
Mhm.
when you start getting runner experience, because I did the same
Mm.
thing, I did a lot of unpaid work experience, and that's what helped me get a runner's job. because of that, that's how I was able to gain experience and why they were happy to employ us. Because you know how it is with entry
Mm,
level positions, they want you to have experience before you actually start. And,
right.
and, and to a certain degree, you do learn when you get in, but like, how did you get that? Like, from like, did you do freelance running and then go into getting a contract job? Because that's what I did. Like, I was able to
Mm,
get an office
mm.
runner job and work my way up like that. What would you do?
Yeah, yeah. So it was really similar. I think one of the only jobs that does get advertised or did back then, because we're talking like 10 years ago, but it's kind of like the post-production runners jobs were kind of more advertised than say the TV and film stuff. So I worked in a post-production house as my first runner's job. And I lived in East London, and it was all the way in Chiswick. And I remember I used to fall asleep on that train journey there and back every time because it was shift work. So, you kind of your runners for more like the production offices and the editors, because it was for sports, so they will be editing live sports. So
Mhm.
you kind of had to be on call to get them their lunch or whatever like that. So that was like my first runner's job. And then after that, because that organization was connected to it was like in a park, it was called Chiswick Park. So it was connected to loads of other organizations there, such as like IMG, which do all the output for like Premier League to Europe and the Middle East. So not necessarily the UK, but for everywhere else. So you'd always get like these jobs coming to the runners at the post production house of those places as well. So I applied for a production assistant job, and then that was my first kind of contract job. And it paid like, I don't know, like 19K a year, which sounds so ridiculous now. Like you can't live on that. Not if you live by yourself. Like you
Mhm.
have to have a base in London. So you have to kind of either be from London and have your parents there and live with your parents until you can like
Mhm.
get a job to move out, or you have parents willing to support you being on your own. So I lived at home for quite a while to do that job, and then when I was in that job is when I initially thought of Bluebird Pictures, because I did feel like I had missed out on the practical side of filmmaking. Um, and I think partly because I didn't really know that I was interested in filmmaking before that. So
Mhm.
I'm not one of these people that, you hear like these veteran directors that say, I got my Super 8 when I was young and I was filming my friends and we're doing this. I wasn't like that. I was creative. I wrote and I did a lot of art, but I didn't really translate that into filmmaking until after uni, if I'm being quite honest. And I think my experience in my first job as a production assistant wasn't great. It was a very male dominated environment. Um, I've said this before, but I'm not someone that comes from a family where we just grin and bear it. So to be in an environment where you are expected to grin and bear it, like take on other people's work and say nothing,
Mhm.
do the manager's job and say nothing, all these things, I was not used to that. So my mouth was running and was being like, no, that's not what you do, that's not right. And I was right, but I was like wrong in their
Mhm.
eyes. Do you see what I mean? So it
Yeah.
wasn't a great experience. And that is initially when I first thought of Bluebird Pictures, because I wanted to create a company where we could create content, but it was like a nice environment to work in.
Mhm.
Like it was a happy environment. It was an environment where if there's something wrong, you can speak up and it's not going to be ignored. And yeah, that was my first experience really. And then after that, that's after that I then joined the runners agency and started getting on like bigger sets, was like Star Wars Rogue One, stuff like that, like stuff like Lock Off PA and then Runners and then ADN. Um, so yeah, so some contracts, some freelance. It was really a mixture of both for quite a long time, for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, see, I understand that because I, yeah, I was doing a lot of that, but I kind of went through a weird kind of transition. So I started off in factual, then I moved over to scripted. Now I'm in broadcast operations. So it's like I've
Mm,
just gone like all over the place.
yeah.
And for me, when I first started in the industry, I was told a lot of the time, you know, just go up to people, make loads of teas, go up to this person and chat to that person. And that's not my personality at all. Like I can't just randomly go up to people and just start making conversation, or it was just not me at all. And I remember when I was an office runner, I was very fortunate actually, because when I was the office runner, there was my line manager was black. My other two runners, one was Colombian, one was black, one was white, and our edit system was mixed race, half white, half black. So every time I tell people that, they're like, "What? What do you mean?" Like it was so diverse. So we just had like a great group of people, so we had each other to lean on. But the one guy who was white, he got away with loads of stuff. He was terrible, terrible, and it was just like, what are we not doing? He was able to go on sets, he was able to do so much, and he was like the incompetent one of the group, and everyone knew it. Like, but he was able to get afforded those opportunities, and then we found out his dad was an acclaimed director. So it
Right.
all
I was
made sense.
literally just
Yeah,
about to say
all
that. Like,
made
who
sense
was
how he
his
got the
dad?
job. It was like, okay. So I totally understand that. So like for me, when I was working at ITV, that was like one of like the worst jobs I ever had. And that's what kind of lit the fire under me to want to do my own stuff and really just kind of start
Right.
to make content. Then I decided to launch my production company and just go from there. What was the moment for you where you was like, okay, you know what, I want to do Bluebird and I want to do my own stuff?
You know, at that first job, so I think I didn't get that job till I was about 23. So there's also this, you also kind of feel like you're so much older than the other runners on the other PAs because of this, exactly what you said, because they know someone. So they got that job through dad, mom, cousin, aunt, whatever. So by the time we get those positions, you do feel a little bit older. So that was one thing. And then I think I had my exit interview at that job when I was a production assistant. So it was working for the football season. So once the season's over, your job is kind of done unless they say come back next season. And in my exit interview, the production manager literally said to me, "You will never make it in this industry because you complain too much. You are brilliant at your job. The paperwork is beyond amazing. Like, because bear in mind, I fixed a lot of paperwork that he didn't do on my first job as a production assistant, but a lot of it to me was common sense. But he literally said I would not make it. And there was kind of, and I remember after that interview, I went back to my desk, picked up my bag, and I left because my shift was technically over. I just left. I just left. And on my way home, on that long journey home, that hour and a half on the same train, it was like district line to district line, one end to the other. I kind of just thought to myself, now this is a moment where I could really crumble, and I could cry and I could get upset because I felt those things. I felt really disappointed that someone had that opinion of me or thought that I wasn't cut out for this business. But it didn't take long for me to realize that he thinks I'm not cut out for this business because I'm not a grin and bear it type of person. It's got nothing to do with my ability, my talent, my ambition. It's literally because I won't just sit and take shit from people. So that's when I was like, I'm going to start this company. So I had saved some money miraculously from that 19K a year. I had saved some money. So the next thing I did is I looked up how do you start a company. Then I find out like on Companies House, you need to register it. So then I'm going through all these ideas for names. And then I think Bluebird came in because I just liked how it sounded. And then my original logo, I had like drawn it out, sketched it out. So I'm still going back to like my art roots. So I drew it out and then got it made into a graphic. Then I registered the company, and then I was like, okay, so what do I do now? Like, what is an actual production company? And I still don't think I really understood that until years later. But anyway, that was where I started, and I bought a camera for about £800. I think it was like a Canon, but I can't remember which one. Then I just started like reaching out to people, and some of the first things that we did, because I was in between jobs at that point, was do short documentaries because it just felt like a better starting point for someone who hadn't made anything, and it meant that I could have less crew and I could be a bit more rogue and stuff like that. So I kind of started creating like these ideas, and then we made a documentary series called Hidden Talent, and it was all about shining the light on kind of undiscovered creatives from different backgrounds and stuff like that. And I think we did like 4 episodes, all at like 8 minutes long. And I think at that time, BBC Three was in the transition of going online predominantly. So they were taking a lot of like submissions and a lot of pictures at that point. And I got used to looking at like the back pages of all these websites, like who the commissioners are, what's coming up, because they're not like on the front page of the website saying submit your film or whatever. You've really got to look for it. So they did like an open call for shorts, and I think it was short documentaries. And if you got selected, you got onto their website, and it got promoted and stuff like that. So I think 2 episodes got onto BBC Three,
Oh, wow.
which was really awesome for something I first made, and where the sound was terrible, but it did go to show that it was a good story. And it also taught me that never skimp on sound either. So that was the moment for me when my production manager said that I would never make it. It kind of lit a fire in me to be like, no, I will make it, and I'll make it in with class as well, and I'll make it with dignity, and I won't treat people the way you treated me. Like, that's not how businesses should be run, but they often are, and that really upset me. And I wanted to not only create content for myself as an aspiring director, but also create something where other people feel like um, they can actually express themselves and they can have autonomy over their work when they work with us and stuff like that. So yeah, that was all the way back in like 2013.
Wow.
So it was something I have been doing for a long time, but it's only, I would say, in the last 3 years or 4 years, probably three, that it's been running like full time, full blast. Before that, it was like sometimes make a film, sometimes work, sometimes do this. Like, you've got to pay your bills.
And that's a hard thing when you want to do your own content. You've got to, for me, listen, I'm juggling so much, and then trying to do your own content as well, then trying to raise money. It's very hard. And so it gets to that point where how do you balance it? And I noticed that you have really taken on your company in the last 3 years to really make it a proper production company. Like, for me, as a working with you, that's great to see. At least I can learn from you, like, okay, what I can do next. What would you offer? What kind of advice would you offer to somebody who wants to, like, okay, legit start their production company? What would they do? Because you've done Greasy Spoon. I'm a big fan of that film, that. And and
Thank
you've got more
you.
content coming out. So, like, what would you say are the necessary steps to do that?
Yeah, I think you need to have a real clear idea of what you want to do. I think you have to remember, being creative is not enough to start a creative business. Like, you probably know this, the higher up you go in the industry, the more people are kind of less creative and more business. So you really have to have that balance of business and creative, so that you can make good creative decisions but also make good business decisions. There's lots of things that I did early on that I think were mistakes, like um paying for websites and stuff that really wasn't up to scratch, but they were the cheaper option, or stuff like that, or kind of not understanding what trading means. Like, if you're trading, you need to submit your taxes every year. But if you're not trading, so there were periods where, like about 3 years, where I did nothing with Bluebird Pictures. So if you're going to register it, and you want, because sometimes you want to register it so no one else can register that name because you love that name, which is totally fine. So you want to register it on company's house, but if you don't do anything with that company for a while, you need to file it as dormant every year. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. I've been teaching some workshops on starting a production company for young people recently, and they're just all looking at me like, this is too much. And I totally get it, but you know what, you need to learn it, because eventually you will be in a position where you can have an accountant do that, but you need to know what that accountant's doing. One
Mhm.
of the best things about running your own business and having to do everything and having to struggle, having to do your own social media, your own marketing, your own funding applications, your own being the director on set, it's hard and it's really hard at first. But when you do get in that position where you can employ other people to do it, you know exactly what they're meant to do, right? You know who's meant to do what and where and when and how much things cost because you've done it all yourself. um, I also think when you're first starting out, one of the biggest frustrations is the only way to really fund it is to work full time somewhere else. And that's a real tough pill to swallow, especially when you're so passionate about creating your own stuff. But when I made Greasy Spoon, which was only like a year ago, I was working full time as a teacher. Um, and I did it on a weekend. But I knew I had I had made, let's say, 7 short films before that. I think five short documentaries and 2 short films, but they never really did anything. A couple went on BBC Three. I got a commission from BBC Three in 2019 for a short documentary, so it was going okay. But I could have just carried on making short films forever. But I knew that I wanted to make the short film now,
Mhm.
the calling card, the one that's going to kind of get me noticed or that I can submit to festivals and get some traction and stuff like that. But I never could have made that 8th short film if I hadn't made the 7 short films, good or bad or whatever they were, sound, no sound. I had to do that to learn how to make Greasy Spoon. And now that I've learned how to make Greasy Spoon, I feel more confident in what content the production company makes as a whole. Like I can say this suits us and our message and what we want to put out. And because I've done it all, I know what the director's supposed to do. I know what the producer's supposed to do. I even know what the caterers are supposed to do. I know what everyone is supposed to do. And that comes from doing everything myself. It also comes from being a runner on set and seeing all these people. But you know you've got to juggle a lot. And I would say if one thing I would do differently is maybe start the company with someone, if I could, to be honest. If you've got someone that you make films with already, start it with them. Figure out who's the business and who's the creative. Because when you have to do both, it's really hard. But you have to keep going. So I started Bluebird Pictures technically in 2013. We're now 2021. I'm only just employing people. I'm only just getting to do the content I really want to do, right? So you have to kind of have this real desire to be, what's the word, like autonomous over your own stuff. Um, Otherwise, you might be waiting for someone else to give you that chance for a long time, but you need to give yourself that chance as best as you can.
That's really good advice. And I think you made some really good points because you
Mm.
have to learn every single role in the production. Like you literally have to understand what the production manager does, what the runners are supposed to be doing, what the gaffer needs to do, what the sound guy needs to be doing, literally everything. And you have to do that. And wearing multiple hats, I definitely understand because it can be
Mm.
very stressful. You know, I remember, what was it? I was shooting my web series, Nate and Jamie, and we were filming in an hotel in Holborn. And I remember I was like the PM producer and and trying to direct as well. And then I remember in the middle of directing, one of the hotel staff came in and was like, oh, so you've kind of gone over your booking time. And I was like,
Oh
huh, what?
wow.
And then I told her, look, I signed a contract, we're here till this time. She disappeared after that, but then that's the thing, I could usually have my PM just to handle that or whoever,
Right.
but no, I've got to handle this and then trying to set up the shot and direct the actors. So it's a lot to do. And I think you made some really good points because it's really about understanding what you want your brand and your company to represent and where you want it to go. And I would agree, doing it with somebody else would help a lot. But sometimes you don't have, it's hard meeting people who
Yeah.
have the same drive and passion as you. So sometimes it's just
Yeah.
easier to do it yourself. You just kind of
Definitely to start
go.
off with. Definitely to start off with.
Mhm.
If you don't have those those type of people around you anyway, just because your friends maybe aren't into it, or you didn't go to film school to kind of create those connections with other filmmakers, then you might have to start it yourself. I just think you can't be afraid of wearing many hats, and you can't be afraid of, if you really want it, you will have to fund it doing another job. Like I said, I was a teacher when we did Greasy Spoon, but that's because I wanted to put a bit of money behind my next short. All my other shorts didn't have much finance behind it. It was what we could do with what we had. um but working, I knew that I had to work for that year. That year meant I could get my mortgage because I was in a full-time paid position, which I was never in before. Um, and I was getting older and I needed my house, and I was always kind of like back and forth to my parents because, sometimes a job would work out, sometimes it wouldn't. When you're first starting off as a runner, it's so hard to keep getting those contracts
Yeah.
coming and stuff like that. So I was like forever in my parents' house, like a year on, a year off, a year on, and it was just getting ridiculous. So for me, this is what worked for me. What worked for me is I had enough experience in running a business and the industry to apply for teaching positions and stuff like that, because I love working with young people anyway. So it made sense to be there for as long as it necessary to make stuff on my days off, because you get, the half terms and summers and stuff. So there's opportunity to get paid and also create content until you get to that next step. So that's what I did. It really helped me. But it was a lot. It was a lot. There was some sleepless nights and a lot of headaches because I was balancing so much. But it was totally worth it for me.
And I think a lot of the interviewees who I've interviewed, a lot of them have said about making that solid project, which really will do
Mm,
that. And I think with Greasy Spoon, that's yours. And it's a really
mm.
great film. As I said, it's non-biased here. Like I really enjoyed it when I watched it. And like that has got you into a position now where you've got an agent now, and then
Yeah,
like really, because didn't it get into Aesthetica, the BAFTA qualifying film
yeah,
festival? So that's what you
yeah,
need, especially like with the pilot I did, Talia Versus, like I can't even speak about what's happening with that. But yeah, the reaction from that was positive, and so the writer's doing some big things now. So it really is about producing that high quality film and project, and but it's also being okay with the projects you've done before. Like
right.
you said, that the sound wasn't great, but it still went on BBC Three. Listen, I my project, same issues, but at the same time, it's like as long as the content's there, that's what people
Right.
really care about, and then you're learning from those mistakes. But then I don't think it's even mistakes. I think it's just,
Mm,
look, I didn't have the budget, what do you expect? Like it's like,
right.
so I need to build, and then now look where you are now. So what's next? What's coming up for Bluebird?
What's next? So obviously we're working on the project together, which I'm really excited about. But we
Yes.
can't say too much about it, but it's a really nice, relevant story, without it being too heavy on pandemic and stuff, which is cool. So we're doing that. So I'm not directing that. We have another director who's doing amazing stuff at the moment.
Yes.
One of the other things is I've written a short which I sent to you,
Okay.
which is a weird thriller. We I've sent it for funding, but it's likely now that I can self-fund that, so
Yeah.
that could be coming out soon.
Okay.
But after that, as in terms of the director, that's probably going to be my last short
Okay.
project. Like I said, now that would be like number 9 when I think about it. Sometimes I forget to include all the others that I've done because they didn't really do anything. But like I said, I had to make them in order
Mhm.
to make the one that stood out. So there's no regrets. So there might be one more short, and it's quite short, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes long. And it's kind of similar to Greasy Spoon in that we play with um, people's perception of what's actually happening, which would be cool. All set in one location. I do love scenes and things that can be set in minimal locations. And then the other things, because I've just signed with an agent, we're kind of developing some scripts that I've got. So one is a sci-fi anthology, which is really cool. So that there's like 6 episodes, and each episode is like a standalone story, but they're
Oh,
all
okay.
interconnected.
Oh, I like that.
And then yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit weird and wonderful, but I really like doing that because um I realized genre writing and directing was much more my style. I would still do drama, and I think like I'd be good at it, but in terms of what I'm most comfortable with is more comedy, sci-fi, thriller. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I think, especially as a writer, when you first start out, you want to do something hard hitting and painful and emotional, and you want people to cry when they watch it, and you want people on the edge of their seats. And when you have that perception, because generally that's what wins Oscars, that's what wins BAFTAs, that's
Yeah.
what wins all the awards, that's what gets selected at film festivals most of the time, you put yourself in a box. You're putting yourself in a box to be like, this is the formula and this is the formula I have to do. So then what would end up happening is I'd write stuff and it just felt so forced. It felt so forced. And even as a mixed race person, I started to feel like it had to be driven by race, or it had to
Mm.
be driven by something traumatic, because that was the stories that were in my face about um black and mixed people. That's what I was seeing. So I was like, well, maybe I've got to write something like that too. And it's not that those stories weren't important to me and that they're not important in general, because they are, but there's balance, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be a black writer and write about black trauma, or you can still have black characters and show the black community as you see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really difficult to get to that place where you're okay with not following the formula, because most of the time when you don't follow the formula, it's something that a studio or broadcaster hasn't realized they're looking for yet. But if you just write another Top Boy, they're going to be like, well, we've got Top Boy, right?
True.
And Top Boy is great and it's good, but what are you going to do that makes them think, that's a bit different, or that's, an angle we hadn't thought of before? So yeah, I'm doing a lot of genre stuff, and I think I'm less afraid to do that now. I think that's my point, in a long-winded
No,
way.
but that
That's
was
my
good.
point.
I feel like that was good advice. I feel like you need to hear that, because that's like with chewing gum and time wasters,
Mm,
and yeah, like they had a simple plot, but then they completely changed the genre of it and made it more sellable. And that's what it's a business
right.
at the end of the day. So you need to pitch it like a business, not just like from your own experiences. And I think a lot of black audiences still want the Top Boys a lot of the time. You see
Mm,
that a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love Top Boy, but it's like,
mm,
if we are going to have this conversation about diversity, you need to
hmm.
diversify what you're writing, and I think that's just what it is.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. It's diversifying the stories. I'm not like against these other types of stories being told. Like I said, I still think they're important. I still think there's a place for them, as is evident in what's
Mhm.
being picked up and sent out. But I just think we shouldn't limit ourselves, because people that are not like us are not limiting themselves.
It's
So
true.
that's all I'm saying. Like, don't limit yourself. And I think, when I was writing those traumatic dramas and stuff like that, it didn't flow out of me as easily as a comedy has flown out of me. I've written Greasy Spoon up as a full pilot now, and it was so much easier to write than some other stuff that I tried to write. And you know what, it still is the black experience, it still is a working class experience, but it's not driven by that experience.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's just how I view it, you know um just experiment, because if you're writing something at the moment and you're not connecting with it, and you feel like you should connect it with it because it's trauma or it's your own experience, doesn't mean you're going to connect with it once it goes onto the page. Maybe subvert the genre, maybe change the characters around, maybe change the male lead to a female lead, like just do different things, because there are really no new ideas, but there's new ways of telling a story, right? So
I totally agree. Mhm.
you can still have that black experience, or your community's experience on screen, but you can tell it as a thriller if you want. You can tell it as a dark comedy. You can tell it as a sci-fi. Like Greasy Spoon was the working class experience, but it was a sci-fi, and we didn't like kind of write across the screen, this is about working class people.
Exactly.
But it was, because that's
Hmm.
where I'm from, and that's what I witnessed. And I think sometimes less is more.
I agree. I agree. So thank you for coming on. I feel like this was so inspirational. I feel like if people haven't learned anything, then I don't know what they were doing. But
Well,
where can they
I
find
hope so.
you?
Where can they find me? Where
Yeah,
can they find me? So, if you want more information, I guess, about the company, then you can follow us on Twitter, which is Bluebird Picture, and Instagram, which is Bluebird Pictures, with an S at the end. And we often put calls out for crew, writers, stuff like that. Like I'm really proud that we're now in a position to offer a lot more paid things to people, because my rule is you can only work for me free for once, and then you have to get paid.
I like that.
No more than once.
Mhm.
And I stick to it every time without fail. If I can't pay you, I'll wait until I can pay you. So that's for Bluebird Pictures. For me personally, I've started to kind of separate Bluebird Pictures and myself a little bit now that I've got an agent. So on Twitter, it's Joelle May David 1. So the May is MAE. I have to put my middle name in, otherwise people think I'm a man. I'm not crazy.
I still don't understand that. Like, I still don't understand
Listen,
that. But
I'll,
yeah.
I'll, I'll get emails back being like, "Hi, Mister," and I'll just be like, "No." So I started putting my middle name in just so that they knew. And then the same on Instagram, it's Joelle _May _David.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining me on my podcast. It's great having you and great working with you. So I'm looking forward to what's happening next. So thanks, guys, for listening. Follow me on social media at Kashif Booth or Kashif Booth Entertainment or the Kashif Booth podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes coming soon.